Welcome to today's video's meeting notes, the thing that everybody needs but nobody wants to do. Although they are very important because they help you keep track of what was said in conversations weeks ago or months ago. So many times I've had customers come back to me and say, "Hey Pierre, don't you remember the conversation that we've had maybe a month ago about this decision that we made?" And if you don't have meeting notes, then you cannot really tell them that, no, this is not what we agreed on. But if you do keep good meeting notes and you send them via email, then you're able to prove them that, no, this decision was never made. And then you will ask, well, whose responsibility is it to take meeting notes? Is it really always the project manager? Then yes, typically it's assumed that the project manager will take meeting notes and will send them out after the meeting, just because they are driving the conversation and it's typically easier for them to do, and it's part of their role. But it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, everybody should take notes during meetings. I would encourage anyone to do that, to take good notes. But it's typical that the project manager would be the one sending the notes at the end of the meeting. So in today's videos, I'll give you a few tips about how I consider taking good meeting notes, but also how I do it myself. All right, let's get to it. Simple and eligible. When taking meeting notes, you should keep your notes simple. And what I mean by simple is avoid complicated words, long sentences, paragraphs, and acronyms. I actually have a lot of problems with acronyms. I think they are overly used and not very beneficial to anybody. So in general, I think the main idea is to keep it simple. The simpler the notes are, the easier it will be to read through them for anybody, yourself included, but also to search through them in the future and find the information that you're looking for. Timely. Your meeting notes need to be sent out very shortly after the meeting. My rule is 24 hours. You want to send out your notes not more than 24 hours after the meeting actually happened. And if possible, what I try to do is to send it immediately after the meeting. Why? It's very key because a lot of conversation that happen in those meetings, you may have daily conversations with the same people, which means things evolve over time very quickly. So it's key that you send your notes very shortly after the meeting. Otherwise, you may have to do a lot of adjustments to your notes about things that were never discussed, and it becomes really overly complicated to send meeting notes maybe a week after to try to correct what was said. Yes, this was said, but then it was later said this, and then make adjustments. So keep it timely. Chronologically ordered. I actually think good meeting notes should tell a story. They should tell the story of the meeting. So I believe that the notes that you're taking should reflect the flow of conversation of that meeting. It doesn't have to be a transcript about everything that was said, but if you note the key point in the order that they were said, I think it helps a lot for people reading the notes and even yourself in the future trying to remember what happened during that meeting. Your meeting notes should include actions. This is probably the most important things about meeting notes actually, the fact that we agreed that somebody would take an action. So the actions need to have a name assigned to it and not a team. It's easy to say, oh, this team will do the action. No. We need a name for the person. And if that person is not in the meeting, that's okay. We can actually name someone that is in the meeting to go check with that team that this should be done. So an action should be clear, very clear about what is expected of that person, should have a name, and should have a due date. A lot of meeting notes that I see don't have due dates, and it's kind of missing the point because then you cannot hold people accountable for when this needs to be done. And it's very simple in meetings to just ask the person, when do you think this should be done? So I do that a lot, and sometimes people are a little bit annoyed that I ask them, or when can you get it done by? But otherwise, how do you hold people accountable for their actions? So taking clear actions is very important here. Good meeting notes should include decisions, the decisions that were made during that meeting. And it should include who made that decision. And it could be a collective of people. It could be multiple people who made that decision. Not everyone in the meeting may have made that decision, so it's key to really keep the name of the person who did make that call in the end. But don't get into a trap of listing all the decisions that were made during the meeting, because there might be a lot of technical choices or technical decisions that were taken that don't really matter too much because there are more requirements and they are going to be documented anyway. Or like if you decided that we need to book another session just as a follow-up, maybe it's worth documenting it, but not always. So keep the key decisions only in your decisions in your meeting notes, because you don't want your notes to be 20 pages long about everything that was said. It's not a transcript. So try to keep it short. This may seem straightforward, but you need to keep an attendees list in your meeting note. You need to be able to know who was in that meeting that day. So keep a note of everybody who attended the meeting, but also keep track of who did not attend the meeting. So in my notes, I will show it to you later. I have a list of attendees and I include an excuse section where I keep the names of the people who I was expecting to join, but didn't. Please take the time to review your notes before you send them. So many times I've seen meeting notes with typos, and I've done it myself. I do it all the time as well. I'm not perfect. And what I end up doing is not rereading my notes before sending them, or just reading a section of it. You want to make sure that your notes are clear, that you didn't do mistakes, you didn't do copy-paste errors, and that they are good notes, for the good quality notes for the meeting. Because at the end of the day, the notes are a reflection of your work and people are going to judge you on the quality of your notes. So I think after each meeting, take a few minutes to review the notes, make sure they make sense, even review them with somebody else if needed. If you're not sure about the format, then you can ask for help as well. But make sure you take some time to do that before you send them. And if you don't have time, then don't send them. There is always a moment where you will be able to send it between meetings later during that day or even the next day. It doesn't have to be sent immediately. It's good that it's sent shortly after the meeting, but if the quality is going to suffer for it, don't do it. Just take the time later on to review your notes carefully and make sure there is no mistake in them. Taking good notes in real time during a meeting while you're potentially leading and presenting is really tough. Don't get me wrong. This is probably one of the hardest things you have to do as a PM, because you have to think about the conversation, listen to what people say, but also type what people are saying. And this is very difficult. And it took me years to tune my skill and be able to do that properly. And even today, sometimes I struggle. Sometimes you zone out. Sometimes you miss what was said because you're focusing on what you're typing and not really paying too much attention to the conversation. So here are a few things that I think help with these situations. If you're struggling to do that, then one thing you can do is actually share your screen while you're typing the notes. So if you have your notes presented on the screen, then everybody can follow what you're typing and they're going at the same pace as you. But you have to be a pretty good typer. If you're a slow typer or you make a lot of typos, then maybe it's not the best. Another thing that you can do is ask for people to pause the conversation while you're taking the note, and that's completely okay. People will understand. If you're presenting something, you can stop in the middle of a sentence or between two thoughts and say, okay, hold on a second, I'm just finishing my notes. Take 20-30 seconds to finish what you're doing before actually resuming the conversation. I think that's probably one of the best thing you can do. Just ask for time while you're doing this. And honestly, as I said, this is really hard and I don't have a magic wand. I can't tell you exactly how I do it. I think it's the more you do it, the more familiar you will be with doing it. And at some point it becomes second instinct. And when having conversations and having to take notes, most of the time, I think what I do is when I speak, I don't type. But when others speak, I do start typing. So I kind of play catch up that way in my head, at least, that whatever I say, I don't really type it, but I know what I said because I just said it. And then when I would ask a question, for instance, and when that person starts answering, I would be both listening and typing. So I would be typing my question, for instance, or starting to type the answer while they're saying it. And then I'll add the question later, maybe when I review. Or the best that can happen is that other people start leading the conversation, and then you have a lot of time to catch up and make sure your notes are better. So maybe a little trick is actually to ask questions. If you feel like you're falling behind, just toss a question to somebody. That way, they may they may take a minute to answer you, and you will have time to finish up your notes. So let me actually show you what my notes look like, and you tell me if you like them. You can feel free to use it. It's not rocket science. All right, so the first thing I do at the top of my notes are the attendees. So usually I put, for instance, if I'm attending a meeting, I would put Pierre, Jean, but I keep separate lists for separate teams. So this is the Pierre team attendee, but if it's, let's say, the Google team, then you add the name of people. And then what I do, if I have people that are not attending my meeting, I would list them as excused. So I would have an excuse list as well. So let's say Mary was not attending this meeting. I'm sorry for the typo. And then I would bold the attendees and the excuse so it's clear to people. The format looks a little neater. So that's the first section. I keep the attendees list at the top. Then below it, I would put notes/actions. This is the sections where I keep the notes and I keep the actions. And under that list, I use numbers. So I use a number list because I like the format of having bullet points and numerical values. Why? Also, it's really useful because people during the meeting would actually tell you, Pierre, what is this action on 1B? And then you can easily know which one it is. So let's say notes and actions. So you can say something like, Alex complained about the quality of the software. Then maybe as a follow-up, then there's an action. So action, Pierre to talk to the developer. So this is how I list my actions. And then you continue. So if an action is open, and then as I mentioned previously, you should probably add a date. So sometimes I do like ETA, Friday, and don't just put Friday, Monday, because then you don't really have a date. So Friday, June 20th, for instance. Oh, I said 20th. And then next topic. So maybe we talk about meeting cadence. And maybe next thing is finance. And then you continue like this with bullet points and you indent every time. And you can keep track of the conversations, the actions, the decisions. But this is my format that I use. I will attach a link to an actual document that contains all a note example so you can see it. This was the Diary of a PM. My name is Pierre. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe, give it a like, or leave a comment. These things really do help. And if you have any suggestion for any future video, feel free to leave it in the comment section below as well. Merci and au revoir.